So the Worshipful Company of Fuelers, what they had was they had the coal franchise. There's the Worshipful Company of Fishmongers, the Worshipful Company of Woodcutters, the Worshipful Company of Goldsmiths. You know, there's all these livery companies for trades, right? The Worshipful Company of Blacksmiths, the Worshipful Company of Masons. The Fuelers were about energy, right? They were all about energy. And back then, the energy was coal, which is carbon. And the motto of the Worshipful Fuelers is "In carbon we trust." And look, you you need to finish the book
Yeah, I
because
better finish the book. I was just relating this to you're saying we have this corporate power structure coming more corporate, not government. Were you relating that to the fuelers were splitting off from the king and God, becoming the private sector? Does it relate to that, the becoming more the private sector rather than just government?
okay, so the Worshipful Fuelers collected the first significant tax in England. And it was like, let's say it's an excise tax, okay? Which means that it's a tax placed upon a good. When you pay a toll on a toll highway, you know, if the toll highway is run to a self-sustainment model, the toll will be very low because all of the money simply goes to the maintenance and repair of the road. Okay? If you get into what we call an excise tax, then what you're doing is you're taxing something just for the sake of taxing it, okay? So an example of that would be in Ontario, the harmonized sales tax, the HST. You're just taxing something just for the sake of taxing it, including goods and services, right? Okay? So the thing about the coal tax is it's the very beginning of this money and taxation culture. Okay? Now,
Oh
when you
yeah, yeah,
understand
yeah.
look, taxation is the other side of banking as well. You can't have centralized banking without an income tax, because the income tax, basically when a state borrows from an outside the nation lender like the IMF, they're collateralizing that debt with the productivity of the people, meaning that they've conscripted you and me to so many hours of labor in the form of taxation to pay back the money they borrowed on our behalf. So you can see the beginning of the whole economic structure we live in now in the 21st century in 3 decades in the 1600s in England. From the Worshipful Fuelers from about 1658 to 1684 and the formation of the Bank of England. All of the things that were, we would say, the modern world in seed format. Okay? Look at the government as the crown in Canada. Okay, the crown is a corporation now. It's not actually a figurehead. But look at the government as the crown. Okay, or look at the monarchy back then as the crown. Okay, so the king would have ministers, advisors, accountants. There would be an entire bureaucracy surrounding the monarchy because the monarchy actually has responsibilities. Okay? And then what begins to happen around this time is that the monarchy begins to work with organized non-titled people. Non-titled means no royal title, no baron or duke or prince or anything like this. And so the Worshipful Company of Fuelers are collecting the first significant tax in England, which was the coal tax. Okay? And so they had a treasury. They had a lot of money that they had collected, and they got a fee or a commission for collecting the coal tax. And they did quite well from this. And after the great fire of London, the rebuilding of the city was financed by the Worshipful Fuelers. Okay? So whoever the Worshipful Fuelers were, and I'm not saying I know who they were. There's nowhere in the historical record I could find out who they were.
I'm wondering if they were Jews and the Jews started the fire of London.
Well, look,
Look,
what you see, this is why I don't want to do 5 hours of interview in one day. We're already repeating ourselves. We've already gone over a lot of this stuff in previous interviews, right? So 1655, the Jews are let back in. Okay? Right around that time, the Worshipful Fuelers start up. Another 15 years later, in the 1670s, you get speculative masonry, which is Kabbalah shared with the Gentile. So clearly you can see the encroachment of Talmudic Kabbalistic influence on British society. You see, I didn't want to, you're so adamant on this Jewish narrative, Brian. I mean, I didn't want to be that explicit and come out and say it because I can't prove it.
Oh yeah,
But I can, but I can tell you,
yeah.
there are many of people doing life sentences in American and Canadian prisons for first-degree murder on far more circumstantial cases than the one I just made against Jewish influence in 1600s, late 1600s, second century.
Oh yeah, I can
half.
see it. I can see the way you're going about it.
There's an overwhelming circumstantial case. There's a series of uncomfortable coincidences. Okay? There's an uncomfortable series of coincidences there. You see?
I'm just saying the reason why I'm so direct. Back in 1990, I saw this. The astrologer did a really good job. I mean, I have these tapes. He said, "You're good at stating the most direct route to things, simplified things." So just for my audience and myself, I'm using simple, direct language to state in very simple terms things which you didn't feel you needed to say, but I'm kind of saying it on behalf of the audience and myself because that's just sort of my character. Yeah, that's just my character to do it that way. But you don't have to say it that way.
Like again, I don't like to get real clearly. Okay, now remember, let's recap everything we've talked about today. These are not just normal Jews either. These are Sabbatean Jews. These are satanic apostates. The listener at home has to, the book explains a lot of it. The Light of Darkness will give you a lot of it. But any one of the threads in my thesis and my narrative with Bob in The Light of Darkness, you can go and do your own research and drill down on any one of those things and go even deeper into the story, and it will corroborate the thesis of our book, okay? Which is that the last 375 years of Western history have been leading us back to Jerusalem. They all want it. They're all invested in it, okay? Including Trump. He's a Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar are heavily invested in the Temple of Solomon.
Can you explain, is Trump a Knights Templar? I didn't know that. What does that mean? Is he a member of the Knights Templar?
Yeah.
Is that admitted? Does he admit it?
It's out there now. I don't think that it's false. I've heard it from too many different sources.
Do you know how old he was when he joined? Like, when did he join Knights Templar?
No. Again, it's a separate study. But if anyone wants to find out about that, just go and do some Google research. You'll figure it out. Okay, he's a Knights Templar. Trump is a Knights Templar. I can tell you one thing, that when you're told that he's a Knights Templar, when you know some of their symbology and some of their language, you can definitely see him gesturing toward that culture, right? So they're also fully invested in the Third Temple of Solomon, right? They were
Can you explain for the audience the Knights Templar? Like in 1206, they were destroyed by the Catholic Church and the French king, and they went into hiding. Can you explain a bit what is the Knights Templar? It's another organization, right?
Yeah. The Knights Templar are a Christian crusading order. They were a secret society. They have their own sort of mysteries. They're tangential to the Kabbalistic schools. In later years, they're all sort of commingling and mixing a little bit, so it would be impossible to completely be separate from the Kabbalistic teachings. But the Knights Templar were much more Christian-centric, and I'm not prepared to do a big dissertation on the Knights Templar. It's not a big part of the Light of Darkness, so let's just leave that rabbit hole alone for now. But suffice it for the sake of continuity of this interview with you, we accept that Trump is a Knights Templar, okay? Every single faction in the Western world now in power is invested in the Third Temple of Solomon. Everybody. The Masons are invested, the Talmudic Kabbalists are invested, which are, the Jews, the large majority of Jews. Just about anybody who's anybody is invested in this now, and at least in the three countries we're describing. Okay, so the United Kingdom of Great Britain, the United States of America, and the United Kingdom of Israel. All three of them are fully invested, okay? Fully invested. So, getting back to the timeline, okay? So the next significant event in the timeline for this thesis will be the destruction of the Alaska Mosque, which sits on the site of the Third Temple. Okay? Now, how they're going to do that, I don't know. You know, maybe get into a military scuffle and accidentally have a missile hit it. Maybe they have the technology to take an incoming missile and redirect it to the Alaska Mosque. I don't know. But that mosque is going to go away and the Third Temple of Solomon is going to be built. There's no doubt in my mind.
What if they could just sell it, just sell the mosque and rebuild over it, make a financial deal?
There, you may be right. They just signed a peace deal with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, right? So there's a lot going on in the Middle East, and maybe it will be by consensus. Maybe the Israelis will buy the Alaska Mosque, and maybe they'll come to some kind of Abrahamic confederacy. But that's something that's waiting to happen now. So the Alaska Mosque has to be taken down because that's the site of the Third Temple. I believe that is the correct site. Yeah. So.
Okay. Do you want to get back to the chronology? I really like what you said about the 3 decades from like 1658 and 1694 with the bank. And so do you want to talk
84.
about the 84, yeah, 1684. Do you want to talk about the early 1700s chronologically, what happened?
Well, Freemasonry takes off, and a lot of people get involved in it, and you get the first Grand Lodge of Freemasonry in England. And when you read most shallow histories of Freemasonry, that's when they begin it. They begin it after the Bank of England, okay, in 1684. But that's not the case. It actually began in the 1670s, about 10 years before the Bank of England. So it takes off in the 1700s, in the 18th century, the 1700s. And then you get a Grand Lodge in Scotland, and you get a Grand Lodge in London. And these are the amalgamations of all the smaller lodges, because the way that Masonry first spread, it was small lodges here and there. And then it congealed itself into the Great Lodge. And then it just became something, super organized after that, and, super effective.
They say 1776 was the founding by Adam Weishaupt of the Illuminati. That's a later thing. Is that all part of the same stuff, all part of the Masonic development?
Well, Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati. The Illuminati, if you think about it, was originally probably an attempt to influence the world from a spiritual perspective, meaning that they were trying to create a spiritual body that would challenge the spiritual authority of the Vatican and maybe break that spell, is what I would imagine Adam Weishaupt and the original Illuminati doing. But I can tell you that, from the very beginning of the printing press and the Lutheran movement, Martin Luther, from the very beginning of this entire thing, there's been a very, very strong Jewish fingerprint on the Christianity that emerged, including the great mystic of the Protestant world, Jacob Boehm. Okay, so it's just everywhere when you know what you're looking for, and it's just sort of all roads lead to Jerusalem at this point. And that's another brilliant inversion that the Jews have managed, right? 2,000 years ago, the expression used to be all roads lead to Rome. But now the reality we're living in is all roads lead to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Really kind of ingenious the way they did that.
So anything else about the 1700s? So the Masons were flourishing, And
Hmm.
17th, Adam Weishaupt was more of a spiritual attempt. I guess that floundered or failed or went underground. I mean, they never challenged the Vatican. They never did have a big spiritual realization, did they?
No, no, but as a spiritual organization, they've continued, right? They've continued, but they're just an umbrella organization for the secret societies, right? And it's an interface, I think, between the secret societies and the people who are really running things, which are beyond even the secret societies. Those would be the people talking directly to extraterrestrials,
Who, the
in my
Illuminati
opinion.
or the secret societies? The secret
The
societies.
the people above the secret societies, yeah, yeah, people above.
You mean the
So the secret.
Illuminati or the Club of 300
Well,
council?
okay,
Yeah.
so I'll repeat myself. The Illuminati is an umbrella organization for secret societies to create a communication interface between the secret societies and what is above the Illuminati.
So the Illuminati are in touch with aliens, and it does exist today. Because the term gets kicked around so much, Illuminati. I'm just wondering, is it just another word for these, like Council on Foreign Relations, the Council on 300, the Club of Rome? Are you saying it
What
actually?
what was what was the statement you made just before that one?
Well, like my concern is, does the Illuminati actually exist as an organization, or is just another word for these various secret societies? Um,
Both,
yeah.
both.
Okay, so it exists as an intermediary with aliens. That's significant. Then it's good to talk about this because it's
Well,
been
look.
vague to me. The
So
Illuminati. A lot of people don't understand what people mean when they say that.
right. Okay. So um, let me explain it to you a different way. If we were to describe Luciferianism as a system of consciousness exploration that looks at human ability to influence our reality and our timeline through nothing but our consciousness, through any number of ways, including ritual, um, you would be looking at a very wide spectrum of people. You'd be looking at some Satanists that go back centuries into Europe. You'd be looking at Wiccans. You'd be looking at certain pagan paths that have existed for centuries, Druidism, and all kinds of things that claim the ability to communicate with elemental spirits and things like this. Now, if somebody came in and wrote a book that sort of amalgamated a lot of this information, they would end up being an umbrella organization that drew a lot of these parties in under one roof. So an example of that would be, Madame Blavatsky writing The Secret Doctrine and
Yes.
becoming a public figure in the early 1900s, to the
Yeah.
point
Well,
where,
late
even
1800s, late 1800s. I think she died around
and 19,
1880s. Yeah.
no, I mean, she, even no, she lived
Or her
into the
work
19.
continued. Yeah.
No, no, she lived into the 1900s. I mean,
Oh,
she was being visited by Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot as well. So,
well, her successor, I think it was Annie Besant. I know she was around in the 20s. I thought that was Annie Besant because I read
well,
that.
Is Annie
Yeah,
Besant the one who went out and found Krishnamurti?
yeah, she found Krishnamurti. Yeah, I
Okay,
think.
so no, that's more around the 40s or 50s, right?
Yeah.
Krishnamurti doesn't really
Well,
become
I
a
think it was
public.
the 1920s he was discovered when he was quite young. But I think in 1881, Madame Blavatsky had the first book with a swastika on the cover, the first magazine, first one to use a swastika on the cover around that time, early 1880s. Yeah.
Okay,
But carry on.
all
I'm
right.
not too
So,
concerned about the dates.
but do you understand the concept I'm trying to get across? Blavatsky and the Secret Doctrine would become an umbrella for a lot of ancillary groups. I'm giving you
Yeah.
another example of what I'm trying to explain the Illuminati as.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
Illuminati is an umbrella organization that brings a lot of people from secret societies into it, right? So you've got the Freemasons, you've got the Rosicrucians, you've got, you know, Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, um, the Frankists, the Sabbateans. It's just
Yeah, this just
it's a quite.
just makes me wonder how they're organized. Who's the president, the vice president? What are their names? Let's read the directory, or is it all secret? You wonder, like, who are the actual people? Like in this century, that century, for the Illuminati. If this is published, it raises those questions about the structure of it.
Well, I would say that the core leadership is distributed into a few key groups. I'd say that there's a group in the Vatican, there's a group in this, the Sanhedrin. There's probably a group in the Islamic world. There would be a group coming out of the what we'll call the Protestant commercial world, Masonic bankers and stuff like that. So they would look, and look, what Weishaupt did is irrelevant, okay? This Illuminati word just gets used too much now. Strip all that
Yeah, that's
away,
what I
and
thought. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. That's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah, but it's a placeholder word that we have to use sometimes. So these days, I would be looking at like the Committee of 300, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations. These are all organizations that cherry pick their board members and are extremely influential in propagating ideologies and programming the public. So they're top level organizations that would um, inform the thinking of newspaper editors. So if a newspaper wanted to take a certain position on foreign policy, like the New York Times or something, they would back up their position with the Council on Foreign Relations and their analysis and their research and their opinion to rationalize their perspective. So the CFR is put out there as a think tank on purpose, right? That's an example of a completely compartmentalized aspect of what we would call the Illuminati or the global power structure. These organizations are not ancillary; they're not incidental. Brian, it's been my experience that things done with intent are intentional, right? So it's
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things are all intentional,
Yeah.
right? It's not happenstance that they exist. The
Yeah.
Bilderbergers, all of these sorts of things. So
Yeah.
now this is what makes what Trump and Johnson and Netanyahu are doing so interesting. Is these three powers seem to be integral in the past in these globalist structures, and now they seem to have separated themselves from them. So you got to ask yourself, well, what's going on? What is going on? I'm not sure I know. I mean, I could just speculate like anybody else.
Yeah, thanks for spelling that out about Great Britain, United States, and Israel, how the relationship with the globe has shifted. I never gave it too much thought till you brought that up. And I don't know either. I'm thinking about aliens. So I was watching, I had Carrie Cassin on my show once. She was talking many times about alien relationships like with China, the United States, Israel. And when they talk about nuclear on the news, they're actually talking about an alien relationship going on. So it's very mysterious.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. What do you make of it?
Um, well, I would agree with your thesis that the aliens, since the creation of humanity, they've been intertwined with creating us. So I think the aliens are intertwined with our national governments. I don't believe so much in the existence of national governments. It's kind of a global world now. There's not really sovereignty, and I think aliens are involved. And there's different factions of aliens, and they're not all. I don't think all 200 countries are controlled by one group of aliens. So I think we're kind of responding to their initiatives, but still the law of karma governs all beings. So I think, as human beings, it's our karma to be in this messed up world because we deserve this birth too. So I'm taking some responsibility, as I think 7.8 billion people have to take some personal responsibility for the world that they're in. If they all have
It,
virtuous karma, that might be in a better world too.
it's the highest form of cowardice to perceive yourself as a victim.
I
If you're
agree.
there, If you're there, you're supposed to be there. Stop
I
stop
agree.
fighting stop fighting fate. You're just expending energy uselessly.
Yeah, karma knows no menu. You get served what you deserve. I totally believe that, and people don't like that about Buddhism. I totally believe that. Yeah, so I'm not. I
Mhm.
don't believe in victim programming, the victim card either. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think
yeah. They
aliens are involved. Yeah.
oh they're 100% involved.
Yep.
They're 100% involved. Um, but I would suggest to you, Brian, that the alien involvements are more entrenched in religious institutions than they are in government institutions. So when you talk about all these countries having their own extraterrestrial relationships, like, the Chinese and the Americans and the Russians, um, that may be true. I'm not saying it's not true, because certainly we have, the reports of Eisenhower meeting with the long-nosed greys. But I think that when you dig into this topic, what you'll see is that there have been human groups on this planet that have had ET relationships going much further back than anything Carrie Cassidy is talking about. Well, I mean, she goes way far back into antiquity, the Sumerian stuff and everything. But what I can't help but notice her overlooking is the very clear line between um, Jews and an extraterrestrial relationship. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I appreciate what you said about religion. You said in earlier videos, the say the Catholic Church is 1 billion people, it's bigger than the Jews. So there's this intentional emotional energy. Let's say the devotion to Jesus, like Christian belief. And you said like with the Holocaust, it's sympathy magic. People feel
Yeah.
sympathy for the Jews because this Holocaust lie. So it's sympathy magic. That energy is feeding the aliens. I think you're saying, right? That really makes a lot of sense.
Well,
Yeah.
this without the sympathy magic, without the without the Holocaust ritual, there would be no Israel today. There would be no, at least there would be no greater Israel. They wouldn't have they would have been able to get away with the institutional murder they've been perpetrating for decades now in that part of the world, right? There's no way they would have been able to get away with that, and they're really making their big move now, right? So they're
Yeah.
going they're going to go for a big regional expansion in that area,
But the
and
the,
all
re-
of
the
this.
realization for me, though, what you said is how the alien relationship with this sympathy and magic, how somehow they're feeding or eating this energy. Maybe reptilians are feeding the energy of sympathy magic, the energy of fear, anger, that kind of thing. That you said humans are very emotional creatures, and that they're directing our intentional emotions, and they're kind of feeding off of our emotions. Is that what you're saying? Like the aliens are getting some energy, like reptilians, off of human emotion.
In part, but that was not really the thrust of what I intended to mean. What I intended to mean was this: sympathy magic is that when you contemplate something, the moment something is brought up, okay, it has an immediate energetic response. So this is why female beauty is used so much in advertising, because it has an immediate emotional response from men. There's an immediate kind of Pavlovian response to it. It's almost like the autonomous nervous system rather than your rational brain responding.
Is that right?
There, you, you, you,
Meteorites.
you, you can't be fully human if you stop being human, Brian. That's my message. That's my message to the Buddhists and the people who overdo it with the meditative austerity. Um,
I agree.
so yeah, how are you going to be fully human if you stop being human, right? So again, you threw me off my train of thought there. And it
Yeah,
was a
yeah. You're
big.
saying if it's an advertising, men see beautiful women, it creates an
Okay,
emotional
so
immediate
yeah,
reaction. That's
so
energy. That's magic, right?
until very recently, I think it's wearing off now, but until very recently, the last decade or so, and this has gone on since the Holocaust industry began in the early 50s, right? So this has gone on for about 70 years now. And I'd say it worked for about 60, but it's losing its efficacy now. But all you had to do was mention the Holocaust, and you would put um, um, you would put Gentiles or powerful nations like the United States into an immediate mindset of sympathy. Sympathy is a highly suggestible mindset. So once you're in the state of sympathy, then the other party says, well, this is what I want. And because you're in a sympathetic mindset, you give them what you want, what they want. And this is how Israel got built, through this harvesting of the sympathetic energy. Well, the Jews just want a little bit more. Yeah, but they're murdering. Oh, the Holocaust. Yeah, the Holocaust. We got, the Holocaust, right? And this is what it does. It sort of interrupts your rational thinking, right? And that was an incredible piece of psychic equity they picked up in that Holocaust false flag. It's absolutely brilliant what they've been able to harvest and what they've been able to do with that harvested energy for the directed purpose of the Greater Israel Project. Unfortunately, the spell is breaking now, and most people are starting to see the truth, which is why it's not spoken about as much, right?
Yeah. Well, I was relating that to aliens. So in your view, how much does that actually involve real aliens, their energy exchange, or this economy that's going on between our realm and their realm?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question again?
Um, um, how does that relate to aliens, that whole sympathetic exchange, that sympathy magic we give about the Holocaust? Are aliens feeding into that energy?
The aliens, intentional energy is a constructive energy. It's a Masonic energy. The Masons are builders. Intentional energy is the first stage in building something, to have the intent to do it. The more people you can instill that intent into, the higher the probability that that which you want to build will get built. You understand?
Well, it makes sense. Yeah, you can't build something unless people want to do it.
Yeah. If you want to look at it through the lens of common sense, but there's a kind of metaphysical dimension to it, right? So this is what it was used for. This is what it's all about, the Holocaust. Now, how did we even get into those situations, World War I and World War II? Directly leveraged off the money system, the control the money system had over global leaders, and in some instances, sympathy with the cause of Israel because of mutual alignment in that cause. Like, again, I go back to the Masons, Knights Templar. There's a tremendous romanticism about Jerusalem, even in the Christian world as well. And the Crusades largely happened before the Enlightenment, so this was the Christian world trying to take Jerusalem back. Okay, so there was already a kind of a fertile ground there for a Jewish-Christian alliance in certain conditions. And those conditions were set by the Jews through the creation of things like the Freemason, so they could all be sort of on the same page, worshiping the same things and wanting the same things.
Okay, getting back to you saying we shouldn't think so much in terms of alien relationship with countries, heads of state and stuff, but more about, say, religion. So that makes sense. So getting back to this, what do you think the actual alien relationship is with this symptomatic, say, over the Holocaust or creation of Israel, all that? Like, are the reptilians sitting there somehow getting this energy? Do you have a vested interest in all of this?
The reptilians, that particular race, as I understand it, is not overly concerned with intentional or psychic energy. That's more of an archonic thing, which is a different. It can be a different entity. But the reptilians are more interested in human viscera, the blood and the guts, and literally eating us in the blood. Right? And this is why there's so much blood in the satanic practices, in the satanic rituals.
So with the Holocaust, the sympathy magic of the Holocaust, which aliens would be interested in that then, if it's not the reptilians? there's like 80 varieties of aliens. Would you want to guess
I,
who would be
I,
behind
I,
that?
I don't want to even know the entire negative pantheon. You know, all the races that would be in on that. I'm sure there's a half dozen or a dozen, but they're feeder races.
Yeah, like the
And
archons is just a word from the Gnostic text like 2,000 years ago. But now we might say some other type of alien you're saying might be behind this whole interest in the Holocaust, sympathy, narrative, lie, you mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Bob told me that the controllers use that energy too. They like to get energy out of human beings as well, and so that's another thing to think about as well, right? And that would be like not as physical in exchange. They're not looking for the blood or the adrenochrome or stuff like that. They're looking more for the psychic dividends, the extreme emotional dividends of
And
um
then,
of an
okay, so the controllers, unlike the familiars, the controllers are some type of aliens, and the familiars are the human elites working with them.
yes.
Yeah, so this is profound. You're saying so different aspects of human civilization, strong, intentional energy could be governed by aliens sort of behind it, benefiting from it for their purposes, their agendas, and there's different agendas amongst different aliens, I suppose, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
This is like the worldview. This is the worldview, how the world works above the human realm. So this is a very important subject, for
It
viewers and
is.
for us to discuss. Yeah.
It absolutely is. This world is run by a world above it. There's no doubt about that. And then there's intermediaries between the two worlds. There's direct communication with the other world. Um, this is the story of human consciousness. Like I said, I mean, I said earlier today, I can't remember what interview, but
Yeah, you're saying it's about
every
consciousness. It's not about spaceships coming down and blowing us up like Independence Day. It's like them influencing our consciousness. Yeah.
yes, and I said that pretty much every religion or spiritual path on the planet has an association with another race or more than one race, a grouping of races. Okay, so there's something that they're working with, whether they acknowledge it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not.
You mean a spirituality or a race? Like, do the white people have a race with the white Nordics? Or are you saying a religion would have a relationship with a particular race of aliens?
I don't understand why you made that a racial statement. Why you said the
Well,
white people.
I just didn't quite hear what you were saying before. Were you saying that a spirituality would have a relationship with a particular group of aliens?
Well, when you look at a religion very, very closely, in many ways it's number one, as we said earlier today, it's a cartography, it's a map, but it's also a system of communications and exchanges with non-physical beings. And not all religions are communicating with the same non-physical beings. The Chinese aren't calling Archangel Michael, by another name, but it's the same being. The Archangel Michael isn't in that spectrum. Whatever the Taoists and the Buddhists are working with are bringing in other entities and beings into that space, the psychic space that they create, right? So certain Christian groups are working with certain extraterrestrial groups. So a lot of Christian groups are still aligned with the Palladian, as far as I'm concerned. The Jewish groups are, for the most part, I would say, for the most part at this point, at least with the Temple people, King Solomon, it's reptilian. Now, the original Torah Jews had a relationship with the Palladians, right? In fact, the book, The Light of Darkness, asserts that the entire Adamic line, which is the brown race, the white race, and the red race, meaning the natives, is the Palladian experiment on this planet.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's significant. Wow.
Yeah.
I could comment on Theravada Buddhist cosmology. Mahayana Buddhist cosmology puts our cosmology down like for me, yeah, my worldview is I relate to Theravada Buddhist cosmology. Like Sokka is called King of the Gods, and Tawatim Seven is like he's like the main deva for our solar system, planet Earth, and below that is the heaven of the four great kings. And Mahayana Buddhism, they say, oh, they're fully enlightened bodhisattvas. Why would you want to bother with these lower devas? And the Hinayana Theravada, they're not fully enlightened. So they put down and barely even have any use for the cosmology that the Buddha himself taught. So there's a competing of cosmologies. I wonder if that relates to aliens. Like I wonder if Sokka and Tawatim Seven could be like the white Nordics or the Palladians. Like they're very good devas from our view. Like Sokka is very virtuous deva. That's why he's principal deva, Tawatim Seven. And Tawatim Seven translates as heaven of the 33. 33 principal devas in the second heaven of the central sphere. That's a big number in Theravada Buddhism. Buddha called it the heaven of the 33. That's what Tawatimsa means. So
did you have anything more highlighted that you wanted to read from Mammon?
Well, it goes, yeah, I could go back a bit. On page 98 in this chapter, you're talking about how our media constantly pointing out micro famines and supply deficits in the communist system with the principle that free market enterprise was much better at meeting the needs of people over the government micromanaging every industry the way the Soviet system did. Then right, they were absolutely correct. Human beings are always better off when they're left to sort things out for themselves. And you say, what's changed? And then later on, you write, it's impossible to believe that the architects of this new monetary system, which the dollar floated on nothing but faith, could see a future for it that would survive in the complex global trading system that we find ourselves in 2020. When you said that President Nixon took us off the gold standard to liquidate markets with capital to inflate the lifestyle of the Western world. So that kind of caught my attention, so I highlighted that. I'm sort of just jumping into that part of your book. It's sort of not what we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Unless you want to finish our thought on the cosmology, that was quite profound. So I guess we clarified that there's an alien relationship with these different energy exchanges, intentional energy exchanges within humanity.
Yeah.
Spiritual systems. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're dealing very often in consciousness, especially when you're developing. You're going to be dealing with beings and entities in other dimensions. Now, it's important to note at this point that my definition of extraterrestrial encompasses interdimensionals, inner Earth. Extraterrestrial would be anything that is a sentient, cognizant life form, usually bipedal, if walking on two legs.
Yeah, and not part of our civilization. Richard Dolan calls them others. They're just not part of our civilization, whether they've been here for millions of years.
They're not part of our civilization. You know, I believe life everywhere. I think there's life in the earth, you know, life in the antimatter, life in space. Just because the aspects of life that we understand, you know, oxygen, air, water, earth, and oxygen, air, water, earth, and fire, you know, the four elements that make up our reality down here. Just because we don't see those in space doesn't mean that an entirely different plasma-based life form economy could not exist. And in fact, it does. You can see video of it, you know, especially that tether video that NASA put out when they were outside the atmosphere. And
I was just going to mention that it was in 1996.
Yeah,
the space shuttle.
Be one of the most
10-kilometer tether. See all these like jellyfish creatures floating around. They're filming it either in infrared or ultraviolet beyond the eye. Just amazing, right? Hundreds of these things.
Yeah, you could almost conceive space as a different kind of ocean, right? There's a lot of life in space that it's not visible to our eye in the light spectrum we look in.
Yeah, it's like an ocean with beings swimming around in it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk here, Brian. As a couple guys who've meditated for a few decades, what do we think is happening when we shut down our senses but we don't go to sleep? Is consciousness going into these other fields of life and engaging these beings and entities? My answer would be that, yeah, in some measure it has to be doing that. It absolutely is doing that. And sometimes when you're out there, like, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and you're out there meditating or praying and you're looking for something to bounce back, when somebody gets a strong feedback, then usually a religion builds up around that guy, right? So, or in the case of a lot of the religions created in the last 100 or 150 years, they're psychological operations. They're disinformation operations by the main governing religion, which would be the Talmudic Kabbalistic Masonic system. So that, I think, Jehovah's Witnesses is a created religion, and I'm not trying to offend people. I really don't want to limit
Yeah, I think
your
it's
listeners.
Rothschild created Jehovah Witnesses in the 1800s. I think so. Yeah.
Mormonism is clearly a Masonic construction. Clearly.
Yeah, I mean, they admit that. I mean, Joseph Smith was a Mason and he used Masonic imagery. Yeah. Well, I don't know if they admit
Yeah.
it, but it's pretty obvious to me.
So it's splintered off into a lot of other expressions now, but really, what these systems do is they put you in touch with certain things. And, it's interesting that there's an extraterrestrial dimension to the Mormon religion. Another one that comes to mind is the bastard offspring, the unintentional and bastard offspring of L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a huge ET narrative right there.
Yeah.
Right. So, in this 21st century, what's going to happen, Brian, is we're going to start to put a lot of the pieces together. And in doing so, we're going to understand what a human being is a lot better. We're going to understand what thoughts are, where they come from, how consciousness works, and that it's actually interacting with other dimensions all the time. We're just not aware of it. We don't know how to sort the information yet. We haven't been taught. And I think that part of the baptism by fire we're going through now is the human race coming to terms with this, connecting all the dots. Some of that is going to be absolutely beautiful, reassuring and affirming and life affirming and spiritually affirming. And another part of it is going to be absolutely horrific as the dark side of these other dimensions are revealed to the human race. It's going to, I mean, there's people who are just going to get PTSD. It's going to be so intense, right? And then we're going to have a much better understanding of history and what's really happened. And we're going to be able to see that people who had this multidimensional communication a little bit ahead of the rest of us, a couple thousand years or a few centuries, they were able to set things in motion that were probably not good for the whole, but good for them. And we're going to revisit all those things. So the whole world is going to get turned upside down, in my opinion, in this century, in the first half of this century, before 2050, in the next 30 years. It's just going to get turned absolutely upside down.
Yeah, maybe that's my view. And I think maybe we've been seeing it since like 2012. They said that's the big year. And the way it was, a lot of things shifted for me in 2012, really woke up a lot since. So like we're in the midst of that right now. You and I are part of it. We're one of the voices in this change. So we're trying to facilitate in a positive, wholesome direction this situation.
Yeah, we're just trying to help people, or at least I'm trying to help people sort through a very complicated and perplexing time. I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody. I'm not trying to say, oh, the world's a crappy place because of the Knights of Malta, or the Knights Templar, or the Kabbalists, or the Jews, or the Sabbateans, or the Egyptians, or the Persians. All I'm trying to do is really describe the situation we're in, what its history and etymology is in terms of the historical artifacts, the real history, because we're not taught the real. The true teaching of history would be showing us the true intent and purpose behind world events leading up to the conclusions that we're seeing now. But we're not told that. We're given little micro stories. We're given a micro story, a managed story for World War II. We're given a managed story for World War I. We're given a very managed story for the Industrial Revolution. And because we're not in on it from conception, from the intent and the vision 375 years ago to what's manifesting now, we can't really put it all together. But they're not going to be able to hide it much longer, just because consciousness is changing for reasons I don't quite understand. People are just becoming more lucid. Some are going deeper into the program, and some are breaking out. So we're headed into a real wild west of a future here, because a lot of the assumptions people are building their reality on are going to be proven false. And like I said, people don't like to live in an unstructured imagination. People prefer a structured imagination, even if it's a hologram in their head. You know, oh, such and such a savior has got me covered. I'm going to heaven. That's just a hologram in your head. If you were going to go to heaven after you die, you'd already be in heaven now while you're alive. The two, there shouldn't really be any separation between the two events, the living and the going to heaven, and the dying and the going to heaven.
Yeah, I want to support what you said earlier. I feel the same way that I'm trying to facilitate something that is very complicated and nuanced and explain to people higher up. And I'm not just trying to blame the Jews. And I kind of did that maybe around 2014, 15, 16, a lot of that. But even then, I had a much more complex and nuanced view. And one point I'm making is I never really have any problem with the Jews. I have a problem with my own people. It's my own people saying, well, fine, it's the Jews. And all these disagreements and arguments, and amongst my closest associates as well, some of them don't have a spiritual or cosmological view. So I'm trying to relate to them. And very few people around me are Buddhists as well with that kind of cosmological view. Yeah, so like you, I'm trying to illuminate, explain something that's profound, nuanced, complex, and I'm not just trying to blame a group because it's all karma. I mean, we all have our own karma. We're all working this stuff out, and people can choose to be on the light side or the dark side. So I really appreciate the way you express that because I feel the same way, and I'm kind of sometimes feel frustrated trying to deal with my own people, right? I'm trying to deal with my own people. I mean, the Jews are over there or wherever they are. They're not actually interfering with my life. I'm trying to deal with my own people. And I think that most people in any political party, they're always dealing with their own people. Like it's more so than the other party.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the situation I'm in too.
But they do have an inordinate influence in the Western world now. I mean, they've been very, very tactical and very pointed in what they're trying to do. I mean, they've taken over the school system in the United States. I mean, that's a Jewish curriculum, and it's designed to shut down any kind of real thinking that would be based in the trivium or the quadrivium. So they've killed the liberal arts. They've turned it into an indoctrination system. A lot of this comes from the erroneous consciousness of the victim, which also has its root. The Jews have played that to the 10th power, the victim consciousness on the Goyim. Look at what you did to us. And so much of what they've said is false, which makes it a magic spell. That's what it is. It's trying to convince somebody that something that's not real is real, and getting to a point where the majority of people in a civilization believe it, and that's extremely disturbing. And that's all another side effect of the sympathy magic of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Well,
I agree with you saying that they create a lot of problem. I was just saying more in my own personal life. Jews are not in my face. They stay away from me, and I stay away of them. I don't have any personal association with Jews. They're not in my face, but my own people are in my face.
I do.
I was just saying that.
On a personal level, I've always enjoyed Jews. I find them to be fascinating, intellectual, disciplined, great to have a conversation or a coffee with. I've never stayed out of their way. They seem to like me. I seem to like them on a personal level. I have no problem with them whatsoever. They've contributed a lot to our society. There's a faction of them, fanaticals, that are into the dark stuff, who've done an extreme amount of damage. I'm also always quick to point out that there's always a free will contract. So yeah, I mean, the Sabbatean Jews in Amsterdam, they had the money and the influence and the tactical know-how to help Cromwell win the throne, how to get the Bank of England and everything. But it all required complicit agreement with Gentiles. And this complicit agreement is throughout history. It's not just the Jews doing this. It's, hey, do you want to do this? We'll give you this much money. Yeah, I'll do that. It's really all of us, really, right? I mean, um, you know, but we're reaching a point in the program now where it's just becoming extremely apparent, right? You know, it's especially as you see this preponderance of really weird people getting into politics now, especially at a municipal or a state or a federal level. You know, these Kathleen Wynne characters, and you know,
Yeah,
Mayor
no, we
Light,
should tell the viewer
Mayor.
that she was the
It's
premier of
almost
Ontario.
it's it it it's almost become a caricature in politics now in North
Yeah.
America. Is the angry, isolated, ugly, spiritually ugly lesbian radical,
Yeah,
whether
we
it's
should tell the
Kathleen.
viewer she was a lesbian. The former premier of Ontario a couple of years ago, Kathleen Wynne, was a lesbian. I also want to ask you about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. You were saying earlier he might be at the top of the totem pole. Can you explain more of your theories on Justin Trudeau, like how he is in the hierarchy of things?
I think this is just my opinion, okay? I think Justin Trudeau was born into the satanic Luciferian system. I think he was entrained in infancy with sexual abuse. I think he's a full product. You see, the MK Ultra programs, they did certain things to people they brought into the programs when these kids were young, and then certain kids are raised that way right at home. It's part of the indoctrination process in the satanic Luciferian system, right? And they believe that this extreme trauma creates a higher consciousness. It's sort of consciousness by attrition. I don't know if it's true or not. I think in some instances, extreme trauma can awaken psychic ability, but I don't think it's extremely spiritually productive. But I think it's mainly the psychic abilities that they're looking for. But my sense is that Justin Trudeau um, is the byproduct of this satanic Luciferian upbringing. I think he's a complete and total dislocated psychotic, and
So, I mean,
and
he's properly trained. I mean, he's probably thoroughly trained to do
yeah,
what they want him to. They give him a script. He memorizes his lines. He's really doing his job well because he's been. And I think he probably is Fidel Castro's son. Maybe the only significance there is the bloodlines. If Castro was
yeah.
Jewish or crypto Jewish, the bloodlines is important to these people. Not to make a
It,
big deal about it, but
I did not know that. You just actually told me something I did not know. Fidel Castro was Jewish.
yeah, there's considerable evidence as a young man that he was Jewish. Yeah, there's Jewish. I made some videos on that. I've interviewed others. Kind
Why
of
does
makes sense.
why does this common theme just keep coming up again and again and again and again?
It's
You
always
know,
worse than you think. Always more than you think. Oh, they're that too. That too. Like Lyndon Johnson,
I
Jewish
heard.
also.
Yeah, I maybe I shouldn't say this because I don't know 100%, but I heard Juan Guzman, El Chapo of the Sinaloa cartel, was Jewish too, right? And it would make sense because there were a lot of crypto Jews in Spain, right? So when they began to populate the New World, the Spaniards, a lot of Jews maybe came over here. Christopher Columbus himself was a crypto Jew, right?
Yeah,
So
Columbus.
this Jewish narrative is so woven into everything. And but what people don't realize, and they say, "Oh, Bruce, Brian, you're just being racist." They were just participating in the societies of their day. Italy was an exploring nation. Columbus was a competent captain of a ship. They chartered him. He went and he did the work. Why are you making such a big deal out of him being Jewish? And the answer to that question is that when they're working in a diaspora capacity, they're not working for the best interests of the host nation. And all you got to look at what is at the extreme predicament that diaspora Jews have left America in now. It is the Jewish population has led America to the situation it's in now. Jews on the left, Jews on the right. Basically, there's a Jewish civil war in America now. It's basically the Sheldon Adelson camp and the Bette Midler camp, right? And I'm speaking comically here. I don't mean that those two are really the leaders, but there's the hardcore, Zionist camp, giving money to Trump, and Chabad Lubavitch in the White House in the form of Jared Kushner. And then you got all the liberal Hollywood Jews saying that, Trump is evil, right? They literally believe he's evil. So it's kind of again, there's that E. Michael Jones revolutionary spirit in the
Yeah.
Jews, creating chaos in the United States.
But I
And
say,
what
getting back to Trudeau, yeah, you're right. It is significant. If Christopher Columbus was Jewish and Fidel Castro was Jewish, it seems likely, that's significant because diaspora, it's their connections of power. You think of with Khrushchev, the Soviet Union, Cuban Missile Crisis, it totally makes sense. Fidel Castro's their man. So it's meaningful. I think around March of 1971, Margaret Trudeau and Pierre Trudeau were in Cuba. They got together with Fidel at the time of the conception of Justin Trudeau. He was born Christmas Day, 1971. So I think they're in the right place together for Castro to have conceived with Margaret Trudeau, Justin Trudeau. So it's significant to look into that. I've done videos, people have talked about that. But getting back to the mind controlling of Justin Trudeau, yeah, so it's significant if he's part of the bloodline, but beyond the bloodline, whether he was or not. Yeah, I agree. He was probably born into it and raised, and right, you say at home, he was prepared for this job. So he's their man in Canada now. He's really competently trained to do what they want him to do, don't you think?
I do, Brian, I do.
I think so.
I think you're dead on there. I think that he's a globalist insider. He's secret society insider. I think he's a ritual sex practitioner. I think he's probably gay. I think he's my personal opinion is that he's probably a pedophile. You know, that's just my opinion. And the last time I checked, we have free speech. But if I'm right about his upbringing, and he bears all the signs of a person raised in those programs, he has the cognitive dissonance. He has, when he needs to be sharp, he's sharp. He's fastidiously attendant to his appearance and his persona, which is another aspect of these remarkably shallow people, these programmed people. And he's showing all the tendencies of a capacity for extreme insensitivity and evil now. You know, I would put forth the argument that you could not do more to destroy Canada than he's done in his 6 years in office, than if it were your publicly stated and deliberate intent. I'm going to destroy this country.
Yeah, like with this COVID thing, I guess 2015, it's been about 5 years now, but yeah, with this COVID thing, yeah, he's going to bankrupt us and New World Order agenda. I call it compassion is aggression. They disguise aggression as compassion. Like compassion is aggression. He's there every day updating us on COVID, like he cares so much. And dumb Canadians buy into this. Oh, Trudeau's looking after us. His popularity is probably going up. You know, he's looking after us now.
Canadians may be the most lost people in the world right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's a tax on apathy because we're living in a time in history where you have to make a strong moral conviction one way or the other. Apathy won't cut it anymore. And Canada is the global capital of apathy. I don't know if it's the weather or the people or what it is, but it's got to be the most apathetic place in the country. The only thing I'm even halfway proud of was the June 2010 G20 summit, you know, with all the people who showed up to protest and everything. That's another interesting thing that the Trump presidency has done, is that it has fractured what should be natural alliances. So the people on the right now, the anti-globalists who support Trump, they should also be the same people who are, you know, protested the G20 and everything, but they're not. So there's been a lot of tactical fracturing of alliances in the last 10 years. And you know, I don't know what's going on. But it seems as though there's a concerted attempt to destroy any collective thinking that would be anti-government or that could really pose a threat to them, unless it's completely orchestrated like it is in the US. And I mean orchestrated to the point where the bricks are laid out. And it's going to get worse, Brian. I can pretty much assure you right now that there are weapons caches being laid about in every major U.S. city now for these Antifa rioters and everything to arm themselves if need be.
Yeah, it seems to be getting worse. We had smoke in the city for the last few days because over the border in Washington, it was Antifa were setting fires. They're deliberately setting fires. Yeah, it seems to be getting worse. I basically agree with what you're saying. Well, Like, but
How
it said
we
the future's uncertain. We'll see what happens.
how we doing for time, Brian? Is that an hour?
Oh, yeah, I guess I should wind up within 10 minutes. I've got to go out tonight. It's Saturday night.
Okay, well let's close this session off right there, okay?
Yeah, we did about an hour and 40 minutes right now, so I really appreciate it, Bruce. This has been a long stretch. So this has been a
My pleasure.
great
My
series
pleasure,
of
Brian.
talks.
I feel like I'm in an RCMP debriefing or something. It's been all day.
Yeah, really milky. We should tell the audience, though, it's because the internet is bad on weekdays during the day because so you're in Costa Rica and the internet. So in the evenings it's darker. So on a weekend with daylight, it's ideal time. So that's why we did so much. Otherwise, I wouldn't tax you so much. So I do appreciate your time, Bruce, and thank you for
My
your
pleasure,
words
Brian.
of wisdom and your insights.
We'll talk to you soon. I have to leave. I have to attend to an emergency right now.
Okay, my friend. Talk to you later.
Bye, Brian.
Bye.